So hello my dear students of class 12 science. We are dealing with the chapter biodiversity and its conservations. So in the last class we have learned about biodiversity concept, its definitions. Then we have gone through the global biodiversity, or we can say the magnitude of biodiversities, where we have learned the number of species that has been discovered till now, and most of the species they are yet to be discovered and they are yet to be described. Then we also gone through the levels or components of biodiversity. We have gone through genetic diversity, species diversity. Then we have learned about the ecological diversity, under which we have learned about alpha, beta and gamma diversity also. Then we have also learned ecosystem diversity. Then we have discussed about the patterns of biodiversity, which was latitudinal and altitudinal, clear, and species area relationship. This is covered in the last class. We also learned about the importance of species diversity ecosystems, and over here the most important thing you have to remember was Ribet-Popper hypothesis, which we have discussed. Then we are going through the loss of biodiversity causes also, where we have learned about habitat destructions, fragmentations, overexploitations, then alien species invasions, and also we have learned about co-extinction. Now from today's class we'll begin with the new topic, that is extinction and how to conserve the biodiversity. Now what does extinction means? Now extinction means the disappearance of a species. If any species will become disappeared from an ecosystem, then that is called extinction. So extinction means the disappearance of a species or a taxonomic group. Clear? So we have got the types of extinction processes, which are natural, we have got mass extinction, and we have got anthropogenic extinction. So we have got three types of extinction. So what does the natural or background extinction means? So due to the change in the environmental conditions, there are certain species which completely become extinct from our own ecosystem. And since it is mainly due to the change in the environmental conditions, they have become extinct. So it is called natural extinction or the background extinction. Next one is mass extinctions, because our earth has mainly witnessed the mass extinction of different types of species. Mainly in the Permian period, around 225 million years ago, we have witnessed the mass extinction of around 90% of water marine invertebrates. Then another mass extinction occurred in the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods, which around 60 million years ago, where it was the mass extinctions of dinosaurs and other number of living organisms. So this particular period was also called the KT boundary. Okay, so we have got the extinction of large scales of mammals, like we have got extinction of woolly mammoth, we have got the extinction of mastodon, the giant sloth has become extinct. So in order, the different types of species have become extinct from our planet Earth. The third one comes the anthropogenic extinctions, which mainly done due to the actions of human beings. It is the man-made extinctions, the extinctions by the human activities, and increasing number of wild species are disappearing because of the over exploitations and the indiscriminate use of the natural resources by the human being, and this is called anthropogenic extinctions. So we are also responsible for the extinction of many of these species. Clear? So why do we need to conserve the biodiversity? Okay, what is the need of conservation of biodiversity? So what do you mean by conservation of biodiversity? So conservation of biodiversity means to manage the natural resources. Clear? We have to manage the natural resources in such a way that we have to keep the balance of those resources. We have to use those resources, but at the same time, those resources should also be restored in the nature. So this balance has to be maintained in the nature, and this is mainly been done when we used to conserve the biodiversity. So biodiversity conservation is the management of the resources with the aim of maintaining a balance between the rate of utilization of resources and the rate of their restoration in nature. Clear? So this balance of using the resources and maintaining those resources in nature is the key role of biodiversity conservation, so that the balance will be there between the living and the non-living components of ecosystem. Alright, so he will talk about the different types of conservations. So why do we need to conserve the biodiversity? So mainly we have got three categories of conservation of biodiversity. One comes the narrow utilitarian regions, number two comes the broad utilitarian regions, and number three comes the ethical regions for the conservation of biodiversity. So what comes under the narrow utilitarian regions for the conservation of biodiversity? That means the direct or the economic uses that we are getting from the nature. So under narrow utilitarian regions, we are getting the benefits from the nature directly. Okay, so first thing is that we are getting the food from the nature, we are getting the fats, the oil from the nature, we are getting fibers, timbers, firewood, paper, and industrial products, and even the medicines from the nature. So in order to get the food, fat, oil, fiber, timber, firewoods, okay, papers, then the medicines, we have to conserve the biodiversity, and this comes under the narrow utilitarian regions or the direct or economic uses that we are getting from the nature. Number 2 comes the broad utilitarian regions or the ecosystem services, the products or the services that we are getting from the nature. And what comes under that? Okay, from nature we are getting the oxygen. Without paying a single penny, we are getting the oxygen free from the nature, right? We have to conserve the biodiversity in order to maintain the climatic conditions. Okay, it's called climate regulations. Pollinations, because bumblebee, butterfly, they are important pollinating agent. They will help in pollinations, and our duty is mainly to conserve them. Okay, nutrient cycling, the microorganisms which are present in the soil, they are essential part of our trophic system because they used to recycle the nutrients. Once the living organisms will be dead, they will go down to the soil, and in the soil they will undergo the process of decomposition by the help of these decomposers, which will help in the cycling of nutrients. Number 5 is the soil protections, aquifers, and the flood controls. Okay, because the plants mainly protect the soil against the wind and water erosion. That means they are protecting the soil against the soil erosions. So it is also essential for the retention of rainwater, its percolations and storage in the aquifers and the reservoirs. So plant cover reduces runoff rainwater. The rainwater percolates in the soil and raises water table of the soil. That means we are getting those products from the nature. We are getting the water from the nature also. So we have to conserve the biodiversity. If you are not going to conserve the biodiversity, then this water balance, this water cycle will also be disturbed. Number 6 is the biological pest controls, where we are trying to control the pest naturally by the help of the natural predators. Then ecotourisms, because biodiversity has many aesthetic and attraction values. So ecotourism is mainly one of it, because ecotourism provides recreation to the people of all walks of life. But over here we have to keep in mind that whenever we are going for the ecotourisms, we should keep in mind that there will be no harmful impact to the environment also. So here also the role of ecotourism comes when we used to conserve the biodiversity. Next one, we'll talk about ethical regions. Okay, because we are the part of the ecosystems, we are sharing our part of the life with millions of species of plants and animals. So this comes under the ethical regions. Clear? And it's our moral duty and our ethical duty to conserve the biodiversity, not to destroy them. We have to conserve the species of plants, we have to conserve the species of animals, and that is our moral duty. Okay, why we have to conserve it? Because we have to pass the rich biological legacy to the future generations. We have to maintain the balance between all the ecological processes and the life supporting systems. Okay, we have to preserve the diversity of genetic materials of species all over the world, and we have to ensure the continuous use of the ecosystems by the rural and the urban populations, and a continuous supply of raw materials to the industry. So these are the 3 categories of the need of biodiversity. One comes under the narrow utilitarian regions, that whatever the product that we are using directly from the nature. Number 2 comes the broad utilitarian regions, that means the services we are getting from the nature. And number 3 comes the ethical regions. Why we have to conserve the biodiversity? Because we are the part of it, because we are sharing our biosphere with the millions of species of plants and animals and the microbes. Clear? So there's a need of biodiversity under the 3 categories. So what are the different methods of conservation of biodiversity? Okay, so we'll go through it. So when we talk about the methods of conservation of biodiversity and the strategies, we have got 2 methods. One is called the ex situ conservation, and number 2 is called the in situ conservation. So let us talk about the in situ conservation. In situ conservations, the conservation of the biotic resources, the conservation of the species will be carried out in their own natural habitat. Clear? So in situ conservations, the conservation of species is done in their own natural habitat. And under this one we have got the few protected areas, which are the biogeographical areas of land or sea, where biological diversity along with the natural and the cultural resources are maintained. Okay, so under the natural resources or the protected areas, we will go through the few ones. Let's talk about the Ramsar sites, okay, which are the wetland sites. This is the syllabus, and this is one of the most important topic for you. So what does Ramsar sites means, or what are wetlands? So wetlands are mainly the areas where water table is at or near the surface of the land. So in wetlands areas, we will find the water table at or near to the surface of the land, and we can say that where land is covered with water is also called the wetlands. And they are mainly the transitional land between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystems. And this wetland includes the swamps, okay, marshes, lakes, then it includes wet grasslands, then peatlands, estuaries, deltas, tidal flats, near shore marine areas, okay, mangroves, coral reefs, and man-made sites like fish ponds, okay, rice paddies, reservoirs, and salt pans. These are all there in our wetlands. Now, among the wetlands, we have got the most important convention called the Ramsar Convention on Wetland and the Ramsar Sites. So, Convention on Wetlands was signed by our government in Ramsar, Iran on 2nd February 1971, and it came to force in the year 1975. So, this convention, remember the date on which it was passed and when it was implemented. Okay. So this Ramsar Convention is mainly an intergovernmental treaty among 168 contracting parties, clear, with around 2186 wetland sites been identified, and it has been included in the Ramsar list of wetlands of international importance. And therefore, since they have been identified as the wetlands, and so they have been known as the Ramsar sites, clear? Okay. Now, National Wetlands Conservation Programs, or the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. So Government of India started this National Wetland Conservation Program in 1985-86 for the conservation and wise use of wetlands in the country. Clear? So what were the objectives? The objectives was to prepare an inventory of Indian wetlands. We have to identify those wetlands in India, to lay down the policy guidelines for the conservation of those wetlands and management of those wetlands in the country, and we have to undertake the intensive measures in priority wetlands. These are the major objectives of the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands. Clear? And from your book, kindly go through the table. It's over there. You will find the Ramsar sites in India. Okay, so kindly go to the table. You will find the Ramsar sites in the book. So kindly go through it. The next one, we'll talk about ex situ conservations. In ex situ conservations, we are not carrying out the conservation of species in the natural habitat. What we are doing is that we are bringing those species from their natural habitat, okay, to the artificial one. We are creating habitat for them. So these are the conservation strategies in which threatened species are bred and preserved outside the natural habitats. So in natural habitats, we are going for in situ conservations. But when we are bringing the species from their own natural habitat, then that comes the ex situ conservations. So ex situ conservation is mainly carried out in zoological park, in botanical gardens, okay, or in aquaria, by help of sheep banking, or by field chimpings or cryopreservations. So first we will talk about the botanical gardens, because those endangered species or the threatened species of plants are they are mainly collected from the natural habitat, and they are mainly being grown in the botanical garden. Clear? Same thing goes with animals also. Okay, if we are bringing the threatened species or those species which are on the brink of extinction from the natural habitat, and when we are conserving them in a zoo, then it becomes the ex situ conservation. So here we are going for captive breeding also. Okay, captive breeding, you can see over there that captive breeding animals which have become extinct in wilds have been maintained in zoological park. So those animals in the wild which have become extinct or which are less in number, we can follow the captive breeding in zoo. And due to the captive breeding which is done in the zoological park, the number of those wild animals is usually been maintained. And when the number keeps on increasing, we can release them in their wild habitat. Clear? So this comes under the captive breeding and under the zoological park. Now what is gene bank? So gene banks are the organizations that store genetic complements of as many living forms as possible. So here we are storing the living forms as possible in the form of seeds, pollen, ovule, tissue culture, and frozen germplasm such as ova and sperm. So in gene banks we can find the collection of the seeds. We can find the collection of the pollen grains. We can find the collection of ovules, the tissue cultures we can see. We can culture, we can store the ova in the sperm. Clear? So this comes under the gene banks. So in gene banks we have got the in-house seed gene banks also. So in in-house seed gene banks fresh seeds are first dehydrated and then stored in a special room under anaerobic condition at a temperature of about -10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. And from this seed bank, seeds can be taken after several decades and they can also be able to germinate. The next one comes the field seed gene bank. In field seed gene bank, plants are stored for a short period of time. Okay, and these plants can be grown in orchards with all the possible strains and the varieties can be restored. Next comes under the extended conservation is cryopreservations, where we can go with the conservation of tissues or the organs or the embryo seeds at a temperature of -190 degrees Celsius. Clear? Okay, and this particular process is called cryopreservations. The preserved materials can be restored, can be revived by special techniques when required. So cryopreservation is done in two ways. First one, by very rapid cooling for the seeds, and number two, by gradual cooling with simultaneous dehydration for tissues or embryos. So this comes under our ex situ conservations. So in situ we have gone through the wetlands, the Ramsar Convention, the Ramsar sites. Now under ex situ conservations we have to go through the term called hotspots. So what are hotspots? This was the technique which was developed by the Norman Moyer. Okay, this is mainly a concept given by Norman Moyer, and hotspots are the richest reservoirs of wildlife that are under threat and need immediate attention for their conservation. So this also comes under the in situ conservation of biodiversity. So hotspots are identified on the basis of following two features. Number one, number of endemic plant animal species should be identified, and also the total number of species occurring in that area should be identified. It's called species richness. Species richness means the total number of species occurring in a particular ecosystem. Number two, the degree of threat to the wildlife in terms of habitat loss. So these two features has to be taken into account in order to identify a particular habitat as a hotspots. Clear? Okay. Now we'll go to the next one, which is called the international efforts for conserving biodiversity. So the first effort was done by mainly a summit which is called the Earth Summit, which was held in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So remember this thing, the Earth Summit, which mainly one of the international effort to conserve the biodiversity. It was carried out in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and was attended more than 170 countries, including 115 head of the states. Okay, so Convention of Biological Diversity became therefore ready on 29 December. So what are the major objectives of this convention? First one, finding and supporting the methods to conserve the biodiversity. Second one is use of biodiversity only up to sustainable limit. Third one, its benefits derived from the use of genetic resources should be fairly and equitably shared. So these are the major objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now next one comes the Agenda 21, which is the action plan recommended by the Earth Summit for the 21st century for sustainable developmental resources. Remember Agenda 21. Okay. Then we have got GEP, the Global Environment Facility, which is established to fund the biodiversity program in developing countries. Then we have got UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. Okay. Then we have got IBSP, International Biodiversity Strategy Program, which has mainly been created to prepare, support and implement the programs for supporting loss of biodiversity. Okay. Then we have got the second World Summit in Johannesburg in the year 2002, which is called the Second World Summit on Sustainable Development, done in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa. So 190 countries attended this summit and pledged to significantly reduce the current rate of biodiversity loss at the global, regional and the local levels by 2010. So in your syllabus, you have to go through the Earth Summit, which was held in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and you have to go through the World Summit, which was held in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Clear? And we have got other things also, like we have got World Conservation Union, WCU. I think you have gone through WWF, the World Fund for Nature also, but in the syllabus you have to go through the Earth Summit and the World Summit. Clear? Then we have got the Red Data Book or the Red List in your syllabus. This Red Data Book or Red List will maintain a document. Okay, the World Conservation Union will maintain a document which is called the Red Data Book or the Red List. So this particular list contains the name of the species which are on the risk of extinctions. It was initiated in 1963. The Red Data Book has made an assessment of 18,000 species, out of which 11,296 species are on threatened list wise worldwide. Okay, and the number of critically endangered species is around 1014 and animals is 925. So this particular red data book or red list, it provides the information to us that there is an urgency, there's a need to conserve our species, our biodiversity. Clear? So the main objectives of red data book are identification and documentation of endangered species and to provide a global index of the decline of biodiversity. So these are the main objectives of red data book or the red list. So under the red data book, what we will find? So this WCU has recognized following 7 threat categories or red list categories. Okay, they are extinct species, then extinct in wild, threatened species, critically endangered species, endangered species, then we have got vulnerable species and the rare or lower risk species. So animals has been categorized into the 7 categories by the World Conservation Union and has been listed in the red data. Clear? So kindly go through what is red data book or the red data list and the categories of the species. So in extinct species or taxon is said to be extinct when there is no reasonable doubt that even its last individual has died. So when all the species has become extinct from the habitat, then they comes under the extinct species. Then comes extinct in wild. Any species or taxon is said to be extinct in wild when exhaustive surveys have failed to record an individual. So if you have failed to record any individual in the wild, then it comes under the extinct in wild. Then comes number 3, threatened species. These species are abundant in some part of their distributions range but severely depleted in other. So in one of the habitat it can be formed abundantly, but in the other part it is not there. They have depleted severely. So this comes under the threatened species. Example is the horned rhino and the grizzly bear. The number 4 comes the critically endangered species. Those species which are facing an extremely high risk of extinctions are placed in the critically endangered species. Then number 5 comes the endangered species E. These species are facing high risks of extinctions in the near future to come. The number of individuals in endangered species is critically low due to unfavorable factor. Example, like Indian rhinoceros, okay, and Asiatic lion, Asiatic wild ass, lion-tailed monkey, blue whale, whooping crane, and great Indian bustard. These are all under the endangered species. Then next comes the vulnerable species V. These species are not endangered but are facing a high risk of extinction in the wild. So population of these species have been severely depleted in the past and have not recovered. So these species are mainly placed under the vulnerable species. Example, deer and the black buck. And 7th category is the rare or the lower species, where the small populations localized in the certain geographical areas habitats are thinly scattered over extensive ranges. And these populations are not vulnerable, they are not endangered at present, but because of the small size, they have risk of entering to these endangered categories, like elephant and the wild buffalo. So here we have finished the chapter biodiversity and its conservation. So we have covered the syllabus. Clear? So all the best for you. Study well, okay, and during the winter time study to your fullest, and if there's any doubt you can simply contact me. Okay, I'll be there to help you. Thank you.